Today, we're diving into a story that, on the surface, might seem like it's just about a marriage. But it is so much more than that. This is really a story about the very formation of Islamic law, a narrative that set permanent principles for a whole civilization, and it all revolves around one truly remarkable woman. So let's meet the central figure here, Zainab bint Jahsh. Now, she wasn't just anyone in the community. We're talking about someone from a noble family, the Prophet Muhammad's own first cousin. But what's really going to stand out isn't her family tree, it's her incredible character. That's where her true nobility really shines.
And you've got to pay attention to who's saying this. This quote isn't from some distant admirer. It's from her co-wife, Aisha. Think about that for a second. In a situation where you might expect some rivalry, Aisha gives this incredible, heartfelt praise. She talks about Zainab's piety, her honesty, her generosity. It just paints this vivid picture of someone who is genuinely exceptional.
There's this one famous story about Zainab that tells you everything you need to know about her. The Prophet once told his wives that the first of them to join him after he passed away would be the one with the longest hand. And, they took it literally. They actually started measuring their arms to see who it would be. But of course, he was speaking metaphorically. So what did he mean? Well, the longest hand was all about generosity. And who embodied that? Zainab. She would work with her own hands, crafting things, and then she'd give away every single thing she earned to the poor. And guess what? She was, in fact, the first of his wives to pass away after him, fulfilling that prediction. It just shows you, she wasn't just sitting and praying. She was a hands-on, hardworking person who gave everything she had back to her community. Okay, so we've established who she is, this incredible woman. But how does she end up at the center of a huge legal shift? Well, it all starts with a major challenge, taking on the rigid class system of pre-Islamic Arabia. We're talking about a society where your family, your tribe, your bloodline, that was everything. And then Islam comes along with this, radical idea. It's captured perfectly in this analogy. People are equal, just like the teeth of a comb. Your status, your family name, your wealth, none of that is the ultimate measure. The only thing that truly sets you apart in the eyes of God is your piety, your consciousness of Him. You can really see the clash of two worlds here, right? The old way, where it's all about your bloodline, versus the new way, where it's all about your character. But here's the million-dollar question. How do you actually make that a reality? How do you take that beautiful principle and get people to live by it? Well, you don't do it with just a lecture. You do it with a powerful, real-life example. And this is it. The Prophet suggests that Zainab, his own noble cousin, should marry Zaid ibn Harithah. Now, Zaid was a man the Prophet loved and had raised in his own home, but he was a former slave. You have to understand, for Zainab and her family, this wasn't just an unexpected proposal. This was unthinkable. It went against every social rule they knew. And so, naturally, she and her family hesitated. This was a massive deal, socially. And right into that moment of personal and social conflict, a revelation comes down from God. This verse makes it crystal clear. When Allah and His messenger decide something, a believer doesn't really have a choice in the matter. Your own feelings, what society thinks, all of that has to take a backseat. And this is where we see that true character Aisha was talking about. As soon as that divine command was revealed, Zainab's hesitation was gone. Just like that. She submitted. She agreed to the marriage. And in doing so, she personally struck a huge blow against that false pride of class and set this incredible example of choosing faith over culture. So that's one major social barrier broken down. But this one marriage was actually destined to solve another, even more complicated problem. And that brings us to our second big challenge, the whole concept of adoption and what it means to be family. See, back then, adoption meant something totally different. It wasn't just taking someone in and caring for them. It was a complete change of identity. The adopted son was treated exactly like a biological son. He even took the father's name. That's why everyone knew Zaid as Zaid ibn Muhammad, Zaid, son of Muhammad. But this was, in essence, a kind of legal and social fiction. Now, one of the core principles in Islam is truth and clarity, especially when it comes to something as important as lineage. It affects everything: inheritance, who you can marry, your whole identity. So this posed a huge question that needed an answer. If an adopted son isn't a real son, then what exactly is the relationship? And once again, the answer came directly from Revelation. These verses from the Quran just completely did away with that old system of adoption. The message was clear. You can't just say someone is your son and make it a biological reality. The command was simple but profound. Call them by their real father's names.
So from that day on, Zaid ibn Muhammad became, once again, Zaid ibn Harithah. So this really laid down 3 key principles for the community. First and foremost, truth in lineage is everything. Second, what if you don't know who the father is? Well, then that person is your brother in faith, an ally, but not your son. And third, it's a major sin to knowingly say someone is your father when he isn't. This brought so much clarity and justice into the whole social structure. Okay, this is where the story really reaches its climax. The law has been revealed, right? It's there in theory. But to really, truly smash a taboo that's been around forever, you need more than words. You need action. And it has to come from the leader himself. This is where this marriage becomes a legislative act. So that marriage between Zainab and Zaid, the one that did so much to break down class barriers, it just wasn't working out. They were incompatible, and Zaid came to the Prophet to complain about it. Now, the Prophet's advice was, hold on to your wife and fear Allah. He counseled patience, but in the end, it just wasn't meant to be, and Zaid decided to divorce her. So after Zainab's waiting period was done, a direct command comes from God to the Prophet himself. He was to marry Zainab. And he absolutely knew what people would say, the scandal, the backlash. He married his son's wife. That's what they'd scream. But to completely wipe out this old custom, he had to be the one to do it. He had to personally take that step that was now lawful, but still a huge cultural taboo. And what's so amazing is that the Quran tells us exactly why this difficult command was given. It wasn't a secret. The whole purpose was so that in the future, no believer would ever feel hesitant or have any difficulty with this issue again. It was a public legislative action designed to prove once and for all that an adopted son is not a biological son, and marrying his ex-wife is permissible. So let's just step back and look at the big picture here, at the incredible wisdom in this whole sequence of events. What we're really seeing is a powerful lesson about how divine law prioritizes truth way above tradition. This was it, the final, irrefutable proof. You can argue about words and texts all day long, but an action like this, from the lawgiver himself, it's undeniable. It was a living, breathing demonstration for everyone to see that the old custom was officially and practically over. The legal fiction was replaced by biological and spiritual truth. And that really brings us to the core lesson, the main takeaway from all of this. The story of Zainab is basically a masterclass. It teaches us that it doesn't matter how old a tradition is or how deeply rooted a custom is in society. If it clashes with a revealed truth from God, it has to be reevaluated and, if necessary, left behind. And so this story from the 7th century leaves us with a really powerful question to think about, one that's just as relevant for us today. In any society, in any age, what should be the guiding force for our values and our laws? Should it be the comfort of doing things the way they've always been done? Or should it be the challenge of aligning ourselves with divine truth?